Okay, to make this hat, we're going to use the yellow Knifty Knitter. This one has 41 pegs. A little trick was I actually wrote how many pegs were on it years ago. It's starting to fade off, so I may have to update that. But this is the Knifty Knitter brand of knitting looms, and again, this one has 41 pegs. If you don't have this particular loom, you can try finding another circle loom that kind of gives you the same circumference, I would say, or the same amount of shape. Like maybe the boy looms, I think, have similar ones to these. But if you have a circle loom, this is what you're going to kind of want to try this project on. Now, the first thing we're going to do is a drawstring cast on, and I have my 2 strands of worsted weight yarn. This is, I believe, an Americana yarn, weight of 3. I used this on a Memorial Day wreath. It's got blue, white, and red throughout it, so I thought it'd be kind of cool to use. And I am using 2 strands at once, and we're going to do our little slip knot so that we can do our drawstring cast on. And we're going to place it on this anchor peg. Just helps keep it in place while we're going around the loom. You don't have to pull it too tight, just enough to keep it in place. Make sure you have a crochet hook for this project, a looming tool, obviously, scissors. Those are the main things you'll probably need, because I'm going to keep this project really simple today. Now for the drawstring cast on, if you remember right, we go behind, then in front, behind, then in front, behind, then in front, and you'll work this away all the way around the loom. As you get to the end of the row, again, keep going back and forth. And don't go too tight, like don't go pulling on this really tight, just kind of keep it gentle as you go back and forth. There's a little slack. So the last one, now what we got to do is we got to go in front, and wherever there are two lines of, two strands, like when we look at it, we don't have anything under here to knit over. Wherever we can knit over, we're going to go ahead and do that. So I just kind of bring some around, again, keeping it loose so it's not too tight, and wherever there's strands on the bottom of the peg, I'm going to bring that up and over. And I'm going to look for that. So this one doesn't have any down here. Again, remember, I'm using 2 strands, so I'm looking for 2 down here. I don't have 2, so I'm going to go over to the next one. And I'm going to do this all the way around the loom. So again, you're going to lay your working yarn in front and look for wherever you can knit over. So go ahead and do that. Okay, we're almost to the end of this row. Just got one more here too. Now we have this is our starting peg. Now we're going to start and do a simple E-wrap knit all the way around it. So the first thing you want to do is kind of go down if you need to, or go around and like push these down if you need to, so that they're out of your way for when you go back through and you knit. So now we're going to go right around, and all we're going to do is do an E-wrap row to kind of lock this in place a little more and give the ones that didn't have the 2 strands the first time something to knit over. So we're just going to E-wrap around it and knit over. Work yourself kind of in a section at a time if you want, since this is a slightly bigger loom. So now we're going to knit over every peg for this row. Okay, we're getting back to the end of this row, or to the end of this row, I should say, and doing our last few that needed to be knitted over. If you want an even more like lacy kind of hat, you could do just one strand, but typically on these looms you end up doing two. And now what I want to do for the next row is I actually want to purl it. Again, we're going to be working down till we can actually take this off this peg, we're going to drop it on the inside, and we're going to be able to gently start tugging it, and it's going to close in the top of the hat. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a row of purling, just to kind of change it up a little bit. And then we'll get into some other stitches after that. So first, now we're just going to purl. So remember with purling, we're going to go in the loops that we have on the peg, put our working yarn, making sure I get the right working yarn. Come here, you little bugger. Okay, so we're going to go through the peg to get the working yarn underneath, turn our peg, create a new loop, and this new loop is what we take off and we place back on the peg. Okay, so again, we're going to go through here. We're going to place our working yarn underneath. We're going to grab it and swoop it up, and see how we have our new loop here. We're going to take the loop that's on the peg off and replace it with those. And we're going to go all the way around and do this one row of purling. Okay, we're getting back to this end of this row, or we're getting to the end of this row, I should say. So I'm doing my last little bit of purling. Okay, and the last peg here. Okay, and go ahead and push these down. Alright, what I want to do is I want to actually do one more row of E-wrap, and one more row of purl before we move on to doing the different stitches that I have designed for this hat. So go ahead and do E-wrap knit for one more row, then go ahead and do purl for one more row, and then I'll meet you back here and we'll move on to the next step. After completing the row of E-wrap and the row of purl, we're now going to get ready to do the drop stitch. Now before we do that, we can actually take our working yarn off of our little peg here, and we can kind of loop it in through the on the outer or the inside of the project, just popping it this way, so that when we're ready to start pulling it, we can. We don't need to pull it yet. We're not going to pull it right yet. I just took the slip knot out. That's just going to hang down, and when we're ready, we'll start tugging on this to help close off this part of the hat, but we're just going to keep that out of our way. Now, to do the drop stitch, what you're going to do is you're going to wrap your peg, knit it over, re-wrap it, leave it alone, go the next peg, wrap it, knit it over, re-wrap it, leave it alone, go the next, wrap it. You can choose to wrap it more than once. I'm only doing one wrap around, and then you're going to knit it over, wrap it, leave it alone, go to the next peg, and continue this around till we get to the end of this row. Okay, we're getting to the end of this row. Again, we're just rewrapping after we knit the peg, just moving our way to the beginning again here. A couple more pegs, and then we do the second part of the drop stitch in about 2-ish seconds. And we'll worry about that one when we get done. Okay, so before we rewrap this one, we want to go back through, and we need to take the top loop off of each of these pegs to create our drop stitch. So take that top loop off gently, and this will create our drop stitch. So we're just going around and removing that top loop. Be very gentle so you don't end up pulling it too much. I have a peg I gotta glue down later. That's why it keeps popping out, so I gotta glue that soon. Keep forgetting to glue it. That's what happens when you've had a loom knitting, or a loom for a long time. Now, because we're back to this row, remember this one we didn't get to do our drop stitch, so we're going to do it now, but what we're going to do is we're going to do a row of purl. So I'm going to create a drop stitch here, but this one I'm going to start doing a row of purl around the loom. But remember, we didn't do our drop stitch on this one, so we've got to create it on this now. And now we're going into the next row, which I want to just do a purl row. This has nothing to do with the drop stitch, this is just the next row that I want to do, and I want to purl this going around. And that means I can now come over here and take this loop off because I can make it that last little drop stitch loop for that row. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go around the loom and I'm going to do a row of purl. You could choose to do E-wrap. Again, you can modify this pattern however you want. I'm just choosing to do a row of purl. Again, making sure you got both strands if you're using 2 strands. Again, that's all we're going to do is we're going to go around and do our little row of purl. Okay, so we're just going to get to the end of this row here, the next couple pegs, or next few pegs I should say, and then we'll go to the next that we want to do. And I do like doing patterns that I feel are pretty, hopefully, simple for you guys. I feel like a lot of people that come to my channel are new loomers, and I just want you guys to have some projects that you can feel comfortable doing, that hopefully are things that are kind of basic, that you can maneuver pretty well, and can still make some pretty awesome things. Alright, last two. Now we're not ready to start pulling that string, but I'm just going to show you something here in a second once I get this last one done. Now again, we did the drop stitch. You might say, well, that's not going to really look like a drop stitch, but if I pull this, you can kind of see there's just a little bit of a different design than the E-wrap we have. And when we're ready, we'll start pulling the string here. And see, it will start kind of closing off the project, but we're not quite ready there yet, so we want to push all this down and go with our next plan, which I'm going to just do a simple row of E-wrap. So I'm going to go off camera real quick, and I'm going to do my row of E-wrap before we come back and do the next part. Okay guys, now what I want you to do is I want you to consider the following things as a set. I want you to do the drop stitch that we did, the purl stitch, and the E-wrap stitch. Excuse me, that's going to be counted as what I call like a set. So again, you're going to do one row of the drop stitch, one row of purling, and one row of E-wrap knit. And we're going to count that as like a set. And I want you to complete that set this many times, and then we'll come back for the next part. So again, go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here when you're all done with that. After completing the 4 sets of that pattern, we're now going to try to close off the inside. I've actually tugged on it a little bit myself, that's why there's such a long strand. But you're going to turn it over like this first, and you're going to gently pull on it, and as you can see, it's going to close up this hole. So just gently pull so you get it as closed as you can. If you can't get all the way closed, that's okay. Don't force it where the yarn's going to break. That's where having a crochet hook will come in handy, so make sure you have one. The only one I have near me right now is a size F hook, but if you have, you might want a bigger size if you have it available. So again, we're just going to go as far as we can to close it off. Then we're going to turn it back around and close it off even more. So again, we're working on this hole right here, gently pulling it, and I think that's about as far as we can go that way. So now what I want us to do is to take this yarn, put it back through the hole, so we can work on the inside of it to kind of bind it off even more. And again, this is where having a crochet hook will come in handy. So let me see if I can zoom in here better for you guys to see. I know the yarn color may not be the best choice, and I apologize for that. But what you're going to do, because we started with 2 strands, what that is going to actually be helpful, we can just separate these strands a little bit. Okay, so I'm separating them, and then I'm going to take my crochet hook and I'm going to go to the opposite side, and I'm going to put my crochet hook in a loop at the base of it, and then I'm going to pull that working yarn, one of the tails, through that loop. Just like so. Then I can take these 2 strands and tie them together to help close that off a little more. So when you do this, you're going to start closing, oops, I just lost my crochet hook, closing it off. Sorry about that, I had to get my crochet hook back. Alright, so now that's what we're going to do. We're going to work the process of trying to close this hole by taking our yarn and going into an opposite side and going through one of the beginning loops that we did, like the beginning rows that we did. Bring my working yarn through there, bringing the working yarn through all the way, and then tying it with the other working yarn. Because once we get this all tied off, then we can actually just trim this yarn. But first we're going to use it to our advantage, like I said, to kind of help close off that hole. See, as we do it, we're getting one more spot closed off. Now I'm going to take this one, again my crochet hook, and I'm going to just kind of keep working my way around until I can get this to close off that hole. Okay, so we're going to take, like I said, the 2 strands that we have to tie them together. That's what's good about using 2 strands to start. If you're just a different way, you would have to maneuver 1 strand through, which I've shown in previous videos. If you're unsure if you got it closed off, just kind of put your hand through. See, I can still see my thumb through. So that means I need to work a little bit more. So I'm going to go over here, look for a loopy loop, bring my working yarn, that tail that we had at the beginning for the project, drawstring through, and tie it off. And you're going to basically keep doing this around as much as you can just to get it as closed off as you can. I mean, right now I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, I need to have one come over here because as you can see, I can see my finger in there because it's not closed off all the way. So now I'm going to come over here and grab a loop at the base and grab one of my working strands and bring it all the way through again and then tie them together. It definitely is a process you get used to the more you're doing it, and again you can keep checking to see if you've got it closed off all the way or not, and you're just going to work that until that hole is no longer there. Because sometimes with using 2 strands it may not close up as nicely as you would like it to, but just keep working it until you can get it closed off all the way. Like I said, I'm just keeping checking, and if you're worried about how it's going to look on the opposite side, just turn it over and check the outside of the project, and that'll give you an idea, like, wait, see, I can see my finger, I want to close it off in that spot again. So I'm going to bring it back turned around and look for that spot that has the opening, like right there. See, I need to get that closed off, so I'll take this yarn and go to the loop on the opposite side, kind of in the beginning stitches that we did. Bring it through. We're almost getting it all closed off, and then we can maneuver on to the brim of the hat. Now I know some people are going to say, how much yarn did this use? I had like 4 skeins of this Americana yarn, the normal size. I can't remember exactly how many were in a skein, but you know, like the ones that are just average size, not the super jumbo one. I had 4 of those, and I used some of these to make a wreath last year, and so I'm using up the rest. I'm working on this, and I still will probably have some left over. So I would say get 4 skeins because you're using 2 strands at once. It's easier to make yarn cakes, which I've made before when I use my yarn ball winder, and do 2 strands off of that. And then you can have, if you have 2 more, then you can use that for this next part we're going to do in a minute here. Okay, now I want to just check and see if I got it mostly closed off. I'm not seeing anything when I go through, and again, I'm going to turn it over to see how it looks on the back side. And again, I think there's just one little spot there that I need to do over here, and we should be good. So that's all you're doing, is just trying to get the hole as closed off as you can. But sometimes you'll notice, like I said, the string did not pull tight enough. So that's why we're doing it this way. That way you don't end up breaking your yarn because you're forcing it to close more than it wants to. Okay. I think we're going to be pretty good. I think with the minor hole that's there is not going to take away from the hat on the outside. So, okay. I think we just need one more over this way because I can feel a little more of a gap than I would like. Alright, get in there. But that's all I'm doing. Like I said, it takes a little time, but you just kind of work around, get an idea of how much you need to close it off. Okay. Alright. And then once you feel that it's closed off enough, you can go ahead and like trim this yarn. I'm going to leave some of it big for right now, just in case I need to do any more later. Because I have so much extra, I'm going to trim some of it now, but leave some in case I need to go back in and close it off a little bit. Or you cannot cut any of it right now if you don't want to. So again, I'm leaving this long tail so that if the project, when it's all done, I need to go back and do this, I can easily go back in and check it one more time before I end up before I end up cutting it more. It's just usually easier to close it off with this drawstring when it's on the loom because it's a little more tight. But I like to keep some extra, and then I'll just make sure that it's closed off as much as I can. Like I said, I'm not seeing any holes except for one minor one there, but it's not causing a problem, so it's not too bad it closed off. Let me just check one more time. I think I'll do one more right here, and I think that will work and have it be closed off all the way. Alright, let's do this. I think that's the only spot that I felt a hole. So let's just one more time, and that should be good, so we can trim this down even more. And then when you're sure you're done, give it a couple knots. I like to double knot or triple knot it when I'm done, just to make sure. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll even do one more over this way. I can get it to cooperate here. And then I'll go to this side and I'll bring it over onto one side here. and then give it another tie. Probably one of the trickier parts of the hat until we get to the bind off part. Alright, so I think we got that tied several times. I'm obsessive sometimes about how many times I know it. Alright. And now I think we're pretty secure to go ahead and trim that. Again, I'm just going to leave a little tail just in case I need to do something at the end. Alright, so that is what we got done. We closed this off. I left that tail just in case I need to do some work with it. And now we need to go on to the part that's going to be the brim of the hat. For this part, we're actually going to be adding in some more yarn because I want the brim to be thicker than this part here. As you can see, this is more open. I want this brim to be more closed off. So that means I need to reach in and grab 2 more strands of yarn. I gotta find my tails here. Where is it? This one? I think this is the one. Okay, so this. So there. So I need to get 2 more strands. This comes from this side. Okay. So I have 2 more that I'm using up that, so I'm going to do 2 more strands of yarn, again, added onto it so that it can make the brim even thicker. And again, I want to keep this hat pretty simple for you guys, and as close to, because again, this was inspired by a mistake, and I'll explain that a little more. At the end of the video, I'll give you more of an understanding of how this came about from a mistake. It's actually pertaining to this next few steps we're going to do. So I need to add in some extra yarn so I can make the brim a little thicker. So I'm going to use 2 more strands of this yarn on top of what I have, and then I'm going to do my little slip knot if I need to, and I'm just going to place that right on this ending peg, not on the beginning peg. I'm going to not do it on this one first, and then I'm going to grab all of the strands, and I'm just going to do a quick E-wrap stitch because this is going to be thicker yarn that it's going to thicken up our brim a little more. And I am going to go ahead and knit this one over to lock it in. So I just added some extra strands. So now I'm dealing with 4 strands at once, and it'll help make the brim thicker. So again, I'm just going to do a quick E-wrap row to lock this in place. And again, remember, if you're doing this, you got 4 strands now, but we still only have the 2 on there right now. So we still have to only knit the 2 over the 4 that we'll have the next time. So see, we're going to end up having 4 here to knit over. So really watch how tight you wrap. This will be important. If you wrap too tight, it will be hard to get those 4 strands over. So really keep an eye on how tight you are wrapping the 4 strands. Very loose because we got to be able to knit them over. So that's what I'm going to do. Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off camera and finish doing this E-wrap row. It's just a little easier and quicker for me holding it off camera. So again, you're going to keep doing this over. You're just knitting the 2 bottom loops you have. Remember, we started with 2 over your 4. So remember that. You're just knitting the bottom over the top, and we're now wrapping with 4, but we still got to knit these that only have 2 over top of it. So go ahead and finish this row up of E-wrap doing that. Okay, so once you finish doing the E-wrap row, again, we only had to take 2 over the 4 things. Now I want you to simply, because I want to keep this simple, I would say you could mix it up with purling, but because there's 4 strands of yarn, I think that might be a little confusing for you guys to make sure you got all 4 loops. So we're just going to keep it as a straight E-wrap until we're ready to take it off the loom. Again, adding in 2 more strands is going to make the brim a little thicker than the rest of it. So go ahead and continue E-wrapping for this many rows, and then we'll be ready to take this off the loom. So again, remember, you got 4 strands on there now. It's going to be best for you to knit like almost 1 peg at a time so you really can focus on getting all those 4 strands over the other 4 strands. So work 1 peg at a time for E-wrap for this many rows again, okay? And then we'll come back and we will take this off the loom. After you complete your 10 rows of E-wrap knit, we're ready to take this off the loom. Make sure you have a couple crochet hooks ready. I found one that would hold all 4 strands, I believe. It's a size 10 millimeter. Yeah, I think I'm saying that right. Or a size N. A little hard to see. I also have my little one just in case I need it. And my crochet hook. So now what we're going to do is we're going to knit this, or bind this off. So this is going to be a little tricky, so hopefully I can show it to you well enough at this angle. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to bind this off by knitting this row, or knitting this one, knit it over, make sure I have all 4 strands, because I noticed the last time, oh, just a quick, I know when you did the 10 rows, it probably twisted, the yarn twisted on you. What I did, which I'm trying to see if I can show you where I did, over here, what I had to do, because it was twisting so much, the 4 strands, I just simply like cut them here and cut them at a different spot and retie them together so I could get rid of a bunch of this part that was twisting. That's just a little tip. If it gets too much, just kind of cut the yarn and retie it together to help you get rid of some of the twist, if that makes sense. So again, let's go back to the binding off. So we're going to make sure you got all 4 strands. We're going to go around this peg. We're going to knit it over. We're now going to move it over to this peg, the one before it. We're going to knit that over. And now we're going to move this back over to this peg. Okay, and we're going to repeat this process going around. So again, we're going to come over here, we're going to knit over this one. Okay, so E-wrap, knit it, knit the 4 strands over, move it from this peg to this peg, knit it over, move it back over to this peg. Paying close attention that you're getting all 4 strands onto the new peg when you move it over. So again, one more time, we're going to go to this peg here, next to the one we're going to bind over off. We're going to knit over, making sure we get all 4 strands. Okay, and then we're going to move it from this peg to this peg. You can see we've already bound off those. Bind it off. Bang. Blah, blah. Move this back over this way. Knit it over. Move it over. Again, make sure you get all 4 strands on there. I'll show you one more time, and then I'm going to go off camera until I get to close to the end, because it's a little easier to work that way. So again, one more time, go over here and wrap it. Knit this peg over. Move these loops to the previous loop, or to the previous peg. Knit it over. Now move it back over to that peg. Okay, again, you're going to just making sure you keep all 4 strands together. That's really important. So I'm going to go off camera and I'm going to continue this process until I get to the last few pegs, and then we'll have officially finishing and getting it off the loom. Okay, we're on our last 2 pegs and finishing up binding this off. I'm making sure I got all my 4 strands here. And remember, we knit this peg, knit it over, move it over to this peg, simply knit it over. Now we're going to want to put this on a crochet hook, and I believe I'm going to have to use this bigger one because my small one will not hold all these all the strands. So kind of stretch this out a little bit. Place it on your crochet hook. Make sure you're getting all loops. Okay. And now we need to join the last to the beginning. Like, we need to come over here and we need to join it, because you can see there's a little gap. This is the first one we bound off. This is the last one. We want to join them together. Okay, so we're just gonna get in here, get our extra yarn, and we're just going to simply go through a loop. It's going to be a little tricky because it's a little bigger crochet hook than I should use. And then we're going to kind of cut a long strand of yarn, about 12 inches, because we don't need a huge amount, and that will give us less detangling to have to worry about. And now all we want to do is take this working yarn through the loop and through this loop. So through both loops, pull all the way through. Okay, and then you can almost make this like a little basket. It's almost like a little basket versus a hat. But it is designed to be a hat. So now what I want to do is I want to tie this off. So I'm going to go down here in the same stitch thing, like when I'm looking underneath it, I'm looking for the stitch that's just kind of below there. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to separate these two strands. So I'm going to take 2 strands through this loop and leave 2 strands in the other. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to grab these 2 strands and bring them through and then tie them together on the inside of the hat. Actually, let's change it up a little bit. Let's pull these back through for a minute. I don't want to do this stitch. I want to go one below it, sorry. So when you're looking, go down in the hat a little more. Okay, go one more stitch down and do the same thing. Separate the strands, put 2 through that loop, all the way through, and now give them a little, tie them, or bind it off a little more fully by knotting it, and this way it's more on the inside of the hat. I double knot it. Okay, and if you're unsure if that's still, you can, I'm doing it one more time just for safekeeping. Okay. Okay, and if you give it a little tug, that'll let you know too if it's good. Now I can take these extra strands, excuse me, cut them down more. And if you want to, you could take a different crochet hook and take these and weave them in if you want. Or try to trim them closer. Sometimes I just like to leave them a little big and then just hide them into the hat on the inside. Okay. And now we have a cute little, I guess you might say mushroom inspired hat. Now the thing is, I want to talk to you about this. Hang on one sec, I gotta try one. I'll be right back and I'll show you a little more about this hat. Okay guys, I want to talk about this because I told you guys about a mistake that I made, and this is kind of what inspired this video. This hat is on my mannequin's head. It is actually too snug to fit me. It's got a little poofiness in the back. I just want to turn around so you can see it does have a little poofiness. Now this isn't necessarily designed for an adult because I used this Knifty Knitter loom, and when I did this bind off, well, like you saw, it made it a snugger fit around this part. So when I tried it on, it didn't quite fit, but I was able to get it on my 4 or 5-year-old daughter at the time. This was years ago when I made this mistake. It was too tight on my head, but it ended up fitting my child's head, like I said, who was about 4 years old at the time. This mannequin head might be a little small. I'd have to figure out the circumference. Let me see if I can figure it out real quick. You guys. Okay, so if we take this head off, she's bald. I'm sorry. I didn't have a. If I were to put the wig on that I normally have on her, this hat would have a harder time fitting. Just to let you know. So if we go and we measure, the mannequin's head. Let's see. Just above the ears. This is about 19.5 inches around, and if I were to quickly measure my head off camera here, let me just see what mine is. I'm at 22, so that's a difference of a good couple inches. So like I said, this mannequin has about 19 and doesn't have any hair on it, so you don't have the bulkiness. So somebody that this is not necessarily made for an adult, I would say young child, maybe a teenager, depending on whether they got poofy hair or not, thick hair or not, or maybe an adult, depending on the shape of the head. Like I said, it's too tight for me, and I'm a 22 inches around roughly. So if we put it back on the mannequin, like I said, you can see that it gives it a little slouch back there. Let me just kind of show you what it looks like from the front roughly. So this was actually a really cute mistake I made because, again, it made it better for my child at the time. So let's just do a little turn again so you can see it. And like I said, it's got a little poofy. What you can't see is you can see the scalp through because of those stitches we did. I'm not sure if it's showing through that well, but you would see the color of someone's scalp or their hair because of the stitches that we did. So I'll go a little closer so you guys can see that. But again, this was my mistake. By using the Knifty Knitter 41 peg loom and knitting off the way we just did, it made it a tighter fit around the head. So it wasn't what I had expected years ago. So it was a mistake that kind of became like this happy accident. So I know that if I use this loom and I do this bind off, it would fit somebody with a smaller head. It may not fit my size. Because again, this is geared towards an adult size hat. And I made something that would be geared towards, like I said, someone that has about 19 inches around circumference for their head. This fits better than me, who has about 22 inches around. So my mistake of binding off turned into something different. So I thought it was kind of cool. But let me get you up a little closer so you can see what it looks like on the mannequin a little closer. As you can see, now I'm holding this in my hands, I apologize. You can see like the stitches look a little different when you look up close, like if someone's hair would be able to be seen through it. And it's got, like I said, this little bounce to it. It's a little different, a little tighter here, like I said, a little more snug around the face, and then like a little, almost like a slouchy hat type thing. So like I said, I would gear this towards a child or like a young adult possibly, because again, my circumference around was like 19, and this, I just tried on, it was a little too snug, that's why I don't want to take pictures of me in it, and her head is around 19 inches around, so it fits a little better on somebody with a smaller head, but gives you a different outlook. By doing this on the Knifty Knitter 41 peg and binding off and doing that, you get kind of a little slouchiness as well. And I apologize for seeing my storage area, I'm trying to hold my camera, but yeah, that is our kind of happy mistake hat there a little bit that I made years ago. It's a little different than I made originally, but I'm pleased with the results, and I hope that you enjoy it. And again, if you like this kind of style, and that, make sure you share in looming groups, because I'm not always able to share my work in there, depending on how busy I am. But again, you know, like that, hit that like button if you've ever made a mistake that helped you create something different. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified of future videos. And please, like I said, please share my work in groups or on your social media so that I can get the word out more about my channel. And have a great day, everyone.